Space in pop culture. What do movies and sci-fi get right or wrong about space technology?
We get asked, for example, the movie Gravity, was it spot on? Is this really what happens in space?
Quantum tech is a hot topic. Demystify it for our listeners.
Quantum is very broad, has the potential to advance the way we do things quite a lot.
Shifting gears a bit, militarization of space is growing. How does this impact technological advancements and international cooperation?
We're part of the geopolitical scene. We can't really avoid it.
I have recently come across a project that astronauts have grown their first plant in space. That's really interesting. AI has almost entered every field. How is it transforming space operations?
AI is proving an incredibly powerful tool for engineers and researchers. What we've seen so far is a drop in the ocean of what AI could possibly do.
Hi everyone, welcome to Spacefront Conversation, the show where we explore the cutting edge of space technology. I'm your host Divya, and in today's episode we have the privilege of speaking with Professor Ilyas from UNSW. Professor Ilyas is a leading expert in signal processing and space systems with extensive experience in space systems engineering and space law education. Together we will dive into his journey, Australia's evolving space landscape, and what the future holds for space innovation. We will talk about your journey, current research, and how policy and industry intersect. Let's get started. Welcome, Professor. Let's start with your journey into space. Everyone has a unique path, and I would love to hear about yours.
Thank you for inviting me to be here with you to talk about space and about my experience and journey. Look, it all started, I've always wanted to, since I was a little kid, to do electrical engineering. And after I finished electrical engineering, the undergraduate, I decided to do a PhD. And, we all dream about working, being an astronaut or working in space or something to do with space. Space is very exciting. I got the opportunity to do my PhD on a satellite project. It was a cooperative research center for satellite systems that was established in 1998, and I was one of the PhD students on that. So I did that. That was the project that ended up launching FedSat, which is Australia's Federation satellite. To put it in context, Australia has launched a handful of satellites since space began, and probably FedSat would have been the third or fourth satellite that was built here. It was the first satellite in many, many decades to be built in Australia, and it was launched from Japan. I had the privilege of doing that. And then I went to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, did my postdoc there on radar. And when I came back to UNSW as an academic, because I did my undergraduate at UNSW, so this was a sort of a return back home, there was BlueSat, which was Satellite Student Society at UNSW. So given that I'd done work in my PhD on satellite systems, it was natural for me to become the academic mentor, and that's how sort of it grew from there. My work in space since I started my work at UNSW. So after I became the academic mentor of BlueSat, the opportunity came about to establish UNSW ECHO. Just before that, I'd received a big grant to establish the Space Systems Engineering Masters, and that's sort of, those were the seeds of it.
Oh, thanks for that great overview, Professor. So it's always inspiring to hear how researchers like yourself found their way into this field. You have been working on cutting edge research related to space technology. Could you give us an overview of the key areas you focus on in your work?
So my work in space systems is really two parts. There is space research or space projects, space systems engineering, and there's the education side, and there's also the space law side. I should add, and we'll talk about that a bit. But so, as I said, my work in space as a researcher really began in my PhD. It was in signal processing, but it was signal processing for a satellite system, for a satellite, and the idea there was to figure out a way to enable communications with the satellite, because while it's traveling very fast in low Earth orbit, because of Doppler shift. So then when I came back to UNSW, joining BlueSat, that's more about educating, mentoring. It was a massive sort of undertaking in establishing a master's in about a year and a half. We had quite a lot of money. And so that's what you really joined UNSW to do. And the work in space systems as a space project with UNSW Echo, we did some really innovative work there. We were the first CubeSat to be launched from, to be built in Australia. It was launched from the States alongside this satellite from Sydney Uni and the satellite from South Australia. In that satellite, we did some really cool stuff like built in a 3D printed structure. We flew some innovative computers and various things. So that sort of covers the two major parts. The space law part, that's still less important because I did space law, which is a bit strange for an engineer, but I also had a direct experience of advising the government, contributing strongly to the review of the Space Activities Act, and which ended up being reformed in 2018, and I contributed to that quite strongly.
Really interesting. That's where, your profile interests me a lot, because two diverse things. One is into the space technology and the other one is space law. They both have different paths. And I can see how your work connects to some major advancements in this field. And UNSW has played a significant role in Australia's space development. What's happening in your lab or in your course, the course you started these days?
So we do have quite a strong space effort. It's spread between different groups. So there's my group, there's AXA, which is also at the Australian Centre for Space Engineering Research, which is also in my school. And there's the work at UNSW Canberra. So that's another sort of part of UNSW that does a lot of work in space. So with me, I'm still doing quite a lot of work with BlueSat. We've got various projects. With BlueSat, they are a space student society, but we do a diverse sort of projects, including off-world rover, and we've competed recently. All the students have competed recently in the Australian Rover Challenge in South Australia. We do satellite, we do drones, we do high altitude balloons, stratospheric balloons. We've just been a couple of weeks ago, actually, we went to Rankine Springs and launched a balloon. We went up to, I think it was 34,076 meters. That's very, very high. You look at the pictures we get and the video we get from there. It's like being on the International Space Station. You see very similar views.
So that sounds like incredibly impactful work happening at your lab, and it really highlights how much innovation is being driven from within universities like UNSW. And stepping back a bit, how do you see the role of universities in shaping the future of space exploration and satellite technology?
Well, they're essential. I mean, if you look at a lot of the advancements that we've seen over the last century, a lot of them have come out of universities. To give you a little example, the CubeSat standard came out of universities, and it came out of not even the research, but an educational effort. So universities are essential because they don't have the same constraints as companies do, where in companies, there's got to be a project that ends up with a profit. Viability is important. So that curtails quite a significant extent the ability of companies to do blue sky research, what we call blue sky research. And blue sky research is where the fundamental, the sort of the new technologies come from. It's exploring ideas that may or may not amount to anything, but if they do, they can change lives. And so, just even if it is just from that perspective, universities are essential. But also, universities have expertise that is at the cutting edge of technology, science and technology. Universities push the envelope. And so, because they have this deep state-of-the-art understanding, they're able to also help companies. So, we get approached by companies saying, we have a problem, would like to work with you on because you've got the expertise. And we can't really, do it in-house for both the lack of expertise or the limited expertise, and because of the commercial realities that they operate under.
That's a powerful perspective on the academic role in space development. I'm curious now, with your own journey at UNSW, what has been the most exciting or challenging research project so far?
Well, I'd like to think all of my research projects have been exciting. Otherwise, I wouldn't do them. I mean, at least in my case, I know that many academics share the same sort of feelings. We do research because we love it. After I finished my undergraduate, I went to a company. I had a scholarship and I had a guaranteed job. And I didn't like it because I wanted to, I've always loved electrical engineering. I wanted to create. I wanted to be the one creating technology, not the one using it, in the sense that I didn't want to use what other people have created. I want to create what advances people's lives. I came back and started doing research. And so from that perspective, I love my research. I choose, and we've got the academic freedom to choose what we research. So we pursue our interests and where we get the greatest satisfaction, which fundamentally comes from pushing the boundary of knowledge, creating new knowledge with the hope of improving people's lives. So now, to go back to your question, I probably, since we're talking about space, the satellites is way up there. I mean, for us to start from scratch, build a satellite, like I said, it had the various innovative concepts or side aspects to it, like the structure of the satellite was a 3D printed thermoplastic. It had the self-warp microkernel, which is a computer, an innovative computer from UNSW. It had a self-healing FPGA. So there were various. That's all beside the project or the scientific payload that the Europeans wanted us to carry as well. So we were part of a global sort of an international effort to understand the thermosphere, which was in itself quite amazing. So that's way up there. But again, I have I like all the projects that I've done, and they've been exciting to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear how your journey unfolded and the impactful work happening at UNSW. Let's move into the role of research in space industry trends. The space industry has seen rapid commercialization with companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin. How does academic research complement or drive the innovation we see in the private sector?
Well, a lot of the commercial success wouldn't be possible without academic innovation. Sometimes it's difficult to see it because the academic advancements, or the advancements achieved by academics, don't necessarily translate into a commercial product for years and sometimes decades. We strive as academics for what we describe as thought leadership. So when we talk about thought leadership, what we mean is thinking in a way that leads the world and leads into new areas and new technologies and new ways of seeing things. And so universities and academics from that point of view are essential. But there's another more practical aspects where academics play a role that these companies wouldn't be able to exist without, which is education. Because if they don't produce the engineers, we have a very strong relationship with industry, where industry come tell us, look, we have a shortage of engineers, we need these skills. And so we consult always with industry to understand what skills are needed, where we should focus probably a little bit more of our energy. And that's because we play a fundamental role in making industry tick.
Yeah, you have highlighted how academic research plays a crucial role in shaping private sector innovation. Could you give us a glimpse into how that's unfolding at UNSW right now? Perhaps with any ongoing projects that have direct industry or government relevance.
I have quite a bit of work with industry, but we do have and government. We do have work with defense, for example. We do have work with energy companies, mining companies. Maybe I'll give a little example with space. We have other people, not myself, but who are working on space mining, and they work. And that's something that is sort of still an idea that is still a bit out there, but they're working with mining companies on that. It's bringing the skills and the experience of mining companies together with the thought leadership of academics to again push the envelope and make this futuristic thing come closer to reality. So this is an example. For me, I do a lot of work on remote sensing and radar, basically sensing. We do work on sensing and communications, where we're looking at using radars. You think of radars as being these big bulky things that probably are at airports, or they're not. They can be about the size of your credit card now. They sit in your car. And so we use them for health. We use them for, very many applications that you wouldn't probably have imagined some years ago.
Yeah. So, what are the biggest challenges researchers face when transitioning space technologies from lab to the real world applications?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it's a very big question. There are significant challenges in bringing technology into the commercial world, commercializing technology. And it's not just that academics face these. I mean, there are some challenges that specific to academics, but in general, technologies don't easily go from the lab or from the sort of the mind to a product that sells. In the end, when you talk about a commercial product, commercially viable product, it has to sell, it has to turn a profit. And so to get there, you have to go from, we have this scale called the technology readiness level, where you start at the lowest side, level 1, with an idea, and at level 10 is where it's commercial, it's turning profit, it's selling, it's viable. So the steps in between are many, and they're not easy to jump. It's sort of, they're all challenging. However, when you get, the higher you go up the TRL chain, the more you have to worry about where big money investment are coming from to enable you to set up the infrastructure that you need to make and sell. There's marketing, there's all sorts of stuff. And you need to make a return to these people. So we see a lot of startups, they fail at that stage. They may have a very good technology, but it's just, out of time, out of place. They weren't lucky with the funding. Many things can go wrong. And this is why probably, a handful out of 100, every 100 startups actually succeed. So this is in general. I mean, taking something from the idea to commercial world is very challenging. However, for academics, there's also whether the desire is there to, many academics are not interested in making that kind of money or go into commercial, doing the work that turns something into a commercial success. They hand it over to someone else. And also there's the funding and the support. Universities are changing. In the past, they were much more at doing this. Maybe for about a decade or so, they've been changing radically, and now universities, sort of count startups as a success. The startups they spin out as a success, as part of their success.
Yeah, that really highlights the complexity of turning research into project. Given those challenges, how critical would you say university industry partnerships are helping bridge that gap and accelerate space innovation?
Well, they're very critical. They're fundamental, actually, because again, I talked about the challenge, the difficulty for academics to take an idea to a commercial product. Companies tend to have a bit more experience in this, so they combining the two. The source of where a lot of the innovative ideas come from, which is in academia or with academics, with the experience and the resources of companies, can help significantly. And again, universities have seen this, and they're working a lot with companies to enhance entrepreneurships and commercialization. So we have programs like this at UNSW. The key thing is that when you think about the process in terms of you have an idea, when you think about it, you take an idea from the lab, where in the lab it might get to the point where it's a prototype on a bench, to a product that can sell. There are many challenges in between. It has to be tested in the field. It has to comply. There are regulatory frameworks that has to comply with. There are commercial imperatives that it has to navigate, and companies have the resources and often the facilities to make this happen.
Yeah. Thank you for those insights, Professor. It's clear that academic research doesn't just follow the trends, it often leads them. So let's talk on those emerging technologies and future space innovation. And quantum tech is a hot topic. Could you demystify it for our listeners?
Well, I mean, saying quantum is the word quantum is very broad as it refers to technologies. So, we've got quantum computing, we've got communications, we've got sensing, and the idea here is fundamentally is that you're using quantum effects, like entanglement or the superposition of states and so on. So that has the potential to advance the way we do things quite a lot. If you look quantum computing, the promises it harbors are incredible. They're mind-boggling. I mean, you're talking about being able to solve problems that might take conventional computer more time than the universe will live in realistic time. That's incredible. But we're still fair way away from that. You got quantum sensing that uses entanglement to enhance sensitivity and resolution incredibly. You've got the communications where secrecy becomes something that you can't break, right? So we're talking about quantum computers being able to break conventional encryption, whereas with quantum communications, you're using entanglement and you can't really, you interfere, you destroy the message. They can't really break that kind of security. So in terms of space, all of these have the potential to revolutionize space. We interestingly, quantum communications, for example, it's been demonstrated, in the lab, but also in space. So all of these have the potential, once they sort of are, whether they're based on a satellite to do something within space, the space domain, or space to Earth, they have the potential to actually revolutionize the way we do space.
So, quantum offers massive potential, especially for communication and sensing. So, another force driving change is AI. AI has almost entered every field. How is it transforming space operations?
Well, AI has only become a big force in the last few years, and it hasn't in this so far. We can't really pinpoint at one thing and say it's now completely different because of AI. But everything is becoming different because of AI, if that makes sense. So, whether it's our education, the way we do education, or the way we solve problems, at the very least, AI is proving an incredibly powerful tool for engineers and researchers to save time in areas where it would have taken, for example, in researching certain things, scouring the literature for certain things. AI offers a much smarter way to search than conventional search engines. I mean, you ask it a question and it knows more about what you're trying to say than it's just a standard search engine. And it can take sources and combine them and give you an answer, synthesize an answer that is a bit more than the sum of the parts, the individual parts. So AI is something that we have to, we're embracing, but we have to understand a lot more, and how it reshapes the way we do things is yet to be seen, because I'm absolutely sure that all the what we've seen so far is a drop in the ocean of what AI could possibly do as it advances more and more. It can help us in designing systems, it can help us in optimizing and modeling, and it in operating.
So, you mean AI is clearly unlocking new capabilities in space operations. So, speaking of futuristic tech, in orbit assembly sounds like science fiction. Is it closer than we really think?
Well, I'd like to think so. In orbit assembly is not theoretically if too far-fetched. I mean, it's not. What do you think about the International Space Station? It was assembled in orbit. A lot of the Mir before it and the Chinese space station now, they're assembled in orbit. So it's not something that is so far-fetched. It's actually a reality. What is probably not a reality at the moment is the commercial viability of it, or the commercial, sort of value of it in terms of being able to do it at a reasonable cost to draw net value out. when you look at the International Space Station, for example, its value has been, amazing. It's been humongous, but its cost has been very large as well, and it's had a colossal cost that required the cooperation of many governments, and the value has been immense, but it's been a value that sort of trickles over a long period of time. When we look at researching new drugs on the International Space Station, you're not going to go up there. They didn't go up there, create a new drug, and come down and start selling it. It's about understanding something, things for the long term.
So, yeah, I have recently come across a project that onboard ISS astronauts have grown their first plant in space. Yeah. That's really interesting. And that really shows how close we are to making what once seemed like sci fi a reality. So, now let's talk about bold predictions. If you had to bet on one technology that will define space exploration in the next 50 years, what would it be?
Well, I think it will have to be propulsion, because you won't be able to get to those worlds that are far away without propulsion technology that will get you there in realistic time. Now, of course, let's not to discount things like if we think about humans, we also have to worry about life support systems, and those are extremely important. So to me, you can have all the life support systems that you want, but without propulsion, you're not going to get there in a reasonable time. But yeah, both of these are going to be crucial.
It's incredible to hear how far technology is taking us, from in orbit robotics to AI and quantum systems. These innovations are changing what's possible in space. And now let's move to space policy and international collaboration. Space policy is becoming a key factor in shaping the future of space exploration. From your perspective, how are current national and international space policies affecting research and development in space technology?
Well, at the moment, I think what we need is a better effort at taking care of the space environment, in the sense that, at least in terms of space debris. The way international collaboration is going at the moment, it's not so bad for research. Again, geopolitics plays a big part, but when you look at us here in Australia, we collaborate with our partners. We have joint funding schemes with, say, the UK, the US, and so on, and Europe, and we have collaborations across the international boundaries. So, in terms of space policy, I think the key thing going forward is going to be space debris mitigation, because we don't want the space environment to become unusable, and that's a big problem potentially.
Appreciate your perspective on space policy. Turning now into international cooperation, what challenges do you see in international collaboration when it comes to space missions or satellite deployments, especially in the current political climate?
Well, you've put your finger on it. It's geopolitics that can be a spanner in the works. I mean, we've gone over the years from being friendly with particular countries and then to being at odds with them, and that affects us, as whether we're academics or companies keen to do some research and development. So geopolitics is a very big factor, and it's something that we can't do much about. It's as academics, we're subject to it just like everybody else. In terms of policy as well, it's the fact that geopolitics affect not only the ability of people to work across borders, but they affect the ability of governments to come up with a suitable international legal framework for governing space. So if we look at the way space laws evolved over the last maybe 70 years, we could see that early on when Sputnik was launched and you had the two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, very quickly they got the global community got together, led by these two, and they put together the Outer Space Treaty, which was ratified by most countries. Moving forward, as sort of space became less mysterious in a way, because people had been doing it for a while, moving forward to the Moon Agreement, for example, in the 70s, less than 30 countries actually signed it, so were signatories on it. So that sort of goodwill, international cooperation, to not only permit research, but to have good governance is important.
So, thanks for shedding light on those collaboration challenges, Professor. Building on that, what policies do you think are needed to ensure space remains a shared resource rather than a battlefield or geopolitical competition?
Well, we have probably two key policies at the moment, or two key areas of law. One is, if you we might call it the environmental law for space, which is basically protecting the space environment. It's primarily about space debris mitigation. We can also include in that, put in lifetime limits on spacecraft and how they deorbit and all that, and space traffic management, situational awareness. And then you also have the weaponization of space. So if you want it to sort of remain a shared, peaceful resource, the first treaty that was put together for space, was created for space. It's called the Outer Space Treaty. It's the treaty for the peaceful uses of outer space. So from that perspective, keeping space a shared resource is about ensuring that the spirit of the original legal frameworks is maintained, which is that space is the realm of, or is the property of all humankind, not any particular group. That space is not subject to appropriation. Maintaining the fairness, maintaining the usability of the space environment, all these are important.
So, those policy ideas really highlight the importance of international cooperation. Speaking of leadership, where does Australia stand globally and how do we lead smartly?
Well, in Australia here, we tend to always punch a little bit above our weight. Our leadership areas are basically, in terms of they come from the research that we do, the policies and our engagement internationally. So, whether we're talking about the individual at the individual level or at the government level, at both of these levels, we do very well for our size and for our resources compared to other countries. So, when you look at space policy, we've had over the years, and many people who have contributed. We have been part of various UN bodies. When you talk about research, we've got many technologies that have come out of Australia. In the past, sadly, the commercialization used to happen in countries like the US. Hopefully, more and more of the good thought leadership and new ideas that come out of Australia will hopefully be commercialized and made to sort of a reality in Australia.
Thank you, Professor. That really highlights how interconnected policy and collaboration are when it comes to enabling process in space. Now, I would love to shift our focus on space sustainability and ethical considerations. This is honestly one of my favorite areas of research and discussion. The idea that we are not only expanding into space, but also thinking deeply how to protect it. That really excites me. As someone passionate about the long term future of space exploration, I believe the way we manage space debris, the frameworks we create, and the ethics we embed today will define legacy we leave behind for generations to come. So let's dive in. Starting with one of the most pressing concerns in this field. Space debris is no longer hypothetical. How do we address it? What technologies or policies are being developed to tackle this?
So there's two parts to this. Like you said, there's technologies and policies. And this is really the interaction between space law and space technology, right? It's law and technology in general. So law has to play a big part in regulating the space environment, or regulating access to the space environment and how things are done up there. So, for example, like we said, the debris mitigation guidelines, at the moment, they are guidelines. We need a better, more binding system for ensuring that people just don't say, look, these are guidelines, I'm just going to ignore them. We do need good behavior, and a lot of people would automatically be keen to be good citizens, but generally we do need policies. So that's on one side. The other side, in terms of technologies, being able to have a better reliability in space, but more importantly, a way to clean up or to keep clean the space environment. So keeping clean the space environment means that We don't discard pieces in space. Like in the past, they used to launch cameras, the lens cap, they jettison it, and it becomes another bit of space debris. We don't do that anymore. So that's one side, making sure that spacecraft, like I said, spacecraft reliability, they don't explode. There are better ways of managing basically hazardous components like batteries and so on, and propellant tanks. But also deorbiting. So making sure that the spacecraft don't outstay their welcome in space or their useful life in space. That's on the other side. We need to do something about what is already there and what continues to be put on there. And many people and companies and universities and so on are looking at ways we could actually clean up the space environment. How do we collect debris? How do we make sure that it comes back down to Earth or becomes harmless?
Thanks for explaining the efforts around space debris, Professor. Shifting gears a bit, militarization of space is growing. How does this impact technological advancements and international cooperation?
Well, like I said, we're part of the geopolitical scene. We can't really avoid it. We're not working within close boundaries anymore. So there is the geopolitics on one side is an important factor, but the militarization of space, I mean, it's not something that is futuristic. It's something that has happened. It's been there for a while in a sense. It would depend on how you define militarization, which is not necessarily just about putting a weapon in space, right? Space is essential to the way we do things, even in our civilian life, and no different to military side of things. So in terms of the impact, the worrying thing would be that mass destruction weapons are put in space, and that's hopefully something that's not going to happen. It's a slippery slope. A couple of years ago, you might remember the Russians wanted to put something in. The Americans said that the Russians were going to put a nuclear source in space, and that sparked quite a bit of panic in the media. It wasn't a weapon. The media was asked. I did interviews where I was asked, "Are they going to put a nuclear bomb in space and be able to shoot us?" No, it wasn't that. It was a nuclear powered source, but that still is a cause for worry because it's a slippery slope. It can be a slippery slope. People start doing that and then it advances. We need to be careful, very, very careful about ensuring that the space is not militarized by putting weapons, especially weapons of mass destruction in space.
So, building on the challenges of militarization, let's look ahead. With moon mining on the horizon, how do we ensure ethical governance and resource sharing?
That's a very good question that is occupying the minds of a lot of researchers, whether they're legal or technical. Yeah, we've seen it with other within other contexts, even within space. So, for example, you look at the geostationary orbit. How do we ensure that space is for the benefit of all when only a select few have had access to that? So what I mean by this is, and this is, we in space, there's a term, the haves and have-nots. When you think about it, the geostationary orbit is a very specific orbit above the equator. So it is above countries that are sitting on the equator. Yet the countries that have had access to the geostationary orbit are basically the US, the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, right? So there are many, many companies that have never had access to it. Yet it's commercially extremely important. It's the geostationary orbit has had an incredible impact on our lives. Same thing with the moon. I mean, how do we make sure that whatever we can access, first of all, does not deplete and destroy what's there, and secondly, it's used for the benefit of everybody, not just the people who can access.
So, those considerations on ethical governance are crucial. Building on that, would you support an international framework like an Outer Space Environmental Protection Treaty?
Yes, definitely. I mean, when we talk about space debris, when we talk about the moon, I just said that we don't we shouldn't be depleting those resources. We shouldn't go to the moon and do the same thing that we've done over and over on Earth, which is that we just extract what we've got and destroy what's there, and we leave it polluted or dead or not useful. So I think we need to make sure that both ethics and laws maintain a natural environment in space that is for the benefit of humankind.
Thank you for those powerful insights, Professor. It is clear that sustainability and ethics are not just technical concerns. They are foundational to how we explore space responsibly and collaboratively. And speaking of responsibility, leadership, and in space doesn't just come from regulation or innovation. It also comes from national vision. That brings me to a topic incredibly proud to explore: Australia's role in the global space ecosystem. So, from groundbreaking university research, a rising wave of space startups, Australia is carving out its unique space identity. So, let's talk about how or what makes our space sector distinct, where the biggest opportunities lie, how we can lead the next frontier. And Australia's potential is huge. Where do you see the next big leap for us?
Well, at the moment we're in a phase where we're finding our feet in space. So we didn't have a satellite built industry. Now we do have one, still small, growing, but growing really fast. We didn't have a launch capability. We're almost there with various companies. So we've had a history in space in terms of being able to support space operations quite well, and that's something that's going to become even more important when we have our own space capability. It is already happening. So in terms of us, our space industry is going to hopefully keep growing. We're a big country, and that means two things. It means that first of all, we have our own special needs because we're a big country that is a continent, that is a massive island, sparsely populated. So from that perspective, our needs from space systems, whether it's remote sensing, communication, are somewhat unique. We also have opportunities because we have a lot of empty space. We have resources, natural resources, and we have a lot of smart people. And so combining these puts us in a very, very good position to make strong advancements in space. The next areas are is remote sensing is extremely important. It's extremely important for us as we look more at the possibility of natural disasters, especially mineral exploration. We've had a long and strong experience in mining, and as I said earlier, we are using those to study and understand better how we can do space mining to bring resources for use in space and back on Earth. But the focus now is to how to rather than taking resources from Earth to space in order to be able to say build bases on the moon or go to Mars or whatever. If you can get those in space, you save a lot. So Australia is very well positioned in these areas.
So, given Australia's huge potential, how do we nurture space startups and innovation ecosystems here in Australia?
Well, that's something we've been trying hard to do for the last decade or so, and we're getting better at it. I mean, we need both a cultural transformation, that's what we've been undergoing, and we need to put the resources together and the support mechanisms for that to happen. So in terms of the cultural transformation, it's the idea that the belief that we can do it here and that we want to do it here. So startups were not really something that Australia did very well in the past, and universities and companies and the government now see that as very important. And we've seen the transformation over the last decades, as I said. So the government's offering funding schemes for startups. They give, they facilitate the operation of startups. They help them out, whether that's through the regulatory framework or funding schemes or various other sort of support mechanisms. Culturally, universities, for example, where if you look at the United States, for example, a large number of startups spring out of universities. We've been doing that now. So now, for example, universities report, and they're proud of being the source of many startups. And so that's where these things are happening.
So great points about supporting startups. What's one critical gap you think we have in Australia's space sector that we need to address to be competitive globally?
Well, at the moment, launch capability is still not fully realized. We have companies that are very close. Probably that's the most striking or most obvious area where we still need to make a step to be to have launch capability from Australia to put us on on an equal footing, or not necessarily an equal footing, but at least to be able to compete.
It's inspiring to hear how Australia is stepping up on the global stage and how academia, government, and startups are shaping a uniquely Australian approach to space. These next few questions are a bit more about you, but still rooted in the passion and purpose behind the space exploration. Behind the scenes of a space mission, have you been involved in one, and what are the biggest challenges?
Yes, I mean, as you know, I set up and led the UNSW Echo project, but even before that, I did my PhD on a space project on FedSat. My work was on the ground segment, where we were doing my research project was to enable communications between the ground segment and the satellite. It had specific challenges. With UNSW Echo, as the project leader, I did not work on the technical side, the day-to-day technical side. I had to handle the project, whether it's the funding, the regulatory. So what are the most important things that I did, in my view, handling the regulatory aspect of the project. As you know, Australia has had the Space Activities Act, which required us to overseas launch certificate for a satellite to be launched. That proved incredibly challenging. As I learned more about space law and understood the regulatory framework, I quickly realized that the framework that we had was a big problem. The Space Activities Act was a big problem. It was set up at a time when satellites were big projects. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars and so on. So for CubeSats or for small satellites, this was a big hurdle to jump. So we lobbied the government. Eventually, the Space Activities Act was reformed. So the role that I played on UNSW on the legal side was twofold. One was to ensure that the project can happen, but also what came out of it was a big effort to change the Australian space legal landscape in order to enable companies to operate without having to go through the same problems that we did. And we've done that.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing those mission challenges. If you could redesign a space policy from scratch, what would be your top priority?
Well, a good space policy needs to strike a balance between facilitating, the operation of people and systems under that policy, as well as protecting the public. So that's really the purpose of a policy. Unfortunately, for example, with us with the old Space Activities Act, it was focused on protecting the Australian public. You look at the U.S. space law, and their legal framework starts with a preamble that says that the purpose of this is to both facilitate the commercial uses of space as well as protect the public. For us, you look at the old act, and it started with the purpose of this act is to protect the Australian public. That's it. And so you can see where the big difference in mentality when you set it up, a legal framework that has this view as opposed to that view. So that's sort of where it should start from. In terms of the specific legal aspects of a good space policy, we have to think about the space environment. That's something that is a bit lacking at the moment. We've thought quite hard about the Earth environment and about protecting people and liability and so on. We have to, in space, hopefully, so a good space policy should not only facilitate the use of space, but protect space and ensure that it's sustainable.
That's a thoughtful approach to space policy. Shifting gears a bit, space in pop culture. What do movies and sci fi get right or wrong about space technology?
Well, that's a very good question. It's a question that always, whenever a new movie about space comes out, that is always asked, and discussions, happen about what he got right and what he got wrong. And we get asked, for example, the movie Gravity, was it spot on? Is this really what happens in space? And look, I don't think movies, unless you're making as a technical, scientific documentary, I don't think they have the necessarily have the obligation to be scientifically extremely accurate. And they do take creative liberties for the spectacle of it. However, however, movie makers should make an effort not to have aspects of what they're showing that are plainly absurd. Now, for example, in the movie Gravity, there are some inaccuracies. I think it's one of the better movies in terms of what being at least reasonable, realistic. But the way they depicted debris happening, where suddenly in a matter of in a very very quick time you have a debris that becomes sort of a chain reaction that grows incredibly rapidly. That's not the way you'd expect it to happen in space. Space is incredibly massive, and the probability of things colliding is very small. And for that chain reaction, yes, we do have the chain reaction idea. So yes, we do have the idea of the Kessler syndrome and the fact that debris will increase the likelihood of more debris because of collisions and breakups, but it doesn't happen that incredibly fast. There are other aspects of the movie that if you want to be picky about it, you can find bits and pieces. But I think overall it was okay. But there are other movies where I can't think of one at the moment, but where you watch them and you go, wow, like, how far from reality. But again, I don't think they have a responsibility necessarily to be close.
Love that perspective on pop culture's take. What's your dream space mission to work on?
Working in space itself is a dream, but being able to go to or send people to Mars, for example, that would be amazing, right? Or working on a space mission where you land, like ESA did, you land spacecraft on an asteroid. I mean, how amazing is that? To with the incredible vastness of space, you've got two small objects. You've got an asteroid, and actually it was a comet and a small spacecraft, and to make them rendezvous and one land on the other. I mean, it's just the precision of these things. They're incredible feats. There's so much that could go wrong. Tiny errors can get magnified to the point where, and we've seen it happen many times in the past, where you think landing on Mars would be easy. It's not. Mars is a tiny speck when you consider the vast distances that you've got. So any of these things would be amazing missions to work on.
Thanks for sharing your dream mission, Professor. Following that, if you could go on a space mission yourself, where would you go?
Look, I'll be happy just to go to the ISS and come back, or to just go to space. I mean, we've seen this become happen often enough now that it's as we talk about space tourism. People have been going to the space. I mean, the edge of space. People say the edge of space, but it is space. Once you go to about 100,000 feet or 30 kilometers, you're pretty much up there. You're not necessarily experiencing weightlessness in the sense that you're not orbiting. You're still in thick enough of an atmosphere that you can't sustain an orbit. But going to 100 kilometers, you're almost there, and that's quite realistic. I mean, we've seen pop stars and celebrities and even ordinary people to go up there.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. What is that one technology from fiction you wish were real?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, being able to teleport. Imagine that you could just go to the moon by teleporting there. Another one is traveling fast enough that you could travel into the future. Even better still, being able to travel both ways. If somebody discovers some kind of wormhole or something that you can go forward and backward, like we see in science fiction movies, that would be amazing. But then again, I mean, you've got the laws of physics. We'll see how. Well, we probably won't live enough to. I shouldn't say that. So I think I said time travel. So being able to travel fast enough that you could go into the future, or better still, finding some kind of a wormhole or something. If the physics ends up allowing it, that you can go back into the past. These will be amazing things to see happen. Probably we will not see them, but but that's what people's imagination.
Yeah, that's a great choice. So, what is that one book or movie that best represents the future of space?
So it's not easy to pick, but one of the classics that is such an amazing movie that gets to you in a way is 2001: Space Odyssey. I mean, to sort of look at space and AI at the same time. You got the computer that takes over the spacecraft. It's eerie, it's scary, but it deals with it's prophetic in two ways, I guess. Space travel and artificial intelligence.
Thank you for sharing those personal stories and quick fire thoughts, Professor. It's always exciting to hear the human side behind the science. As we begin to close out today's conversation, I would like to bring it back to full circle to the future. Because beyond the policies and technologies, it's the next generation of thinkers, engineers, and leaders who will carry this mission forward. So let's wrap up with a forward looking lens from the breakthroughs you are excited about to the advice you would offer those hoping to follow in your footsteps. Looking ahead, what are some of the exciting trends or breakthroughs you anticipate in space technology over the next decade?
Yeah, look, I mean, propulsion is a key area that will make a big difference to the way we do space. Being able to lift more into space, bring things back, transporting people, humans safely. That's an important one. Communications. We're talking about quantum communications. We're talking about sensing, but also in terms of what would be exciting going into the future of our space is being able to go and live there, have a presence there, not like the International Space Station, but broader presence, making people really space travelers, or rather than being earthbound, we're living in our solar system and probably beyond. So for that, being technologies that would help us sustain life safely, travel, being able to communicate, all of these become extremely important. These are where the breakthroughs are. You mentioned the growing plants in space, having breathable air in space, food sources, and so on. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing those exciting trends. Coming to next question, what role do you think academic institutions will play in tackling challenges like space debris, space sustainability, or even human mission to Mars?
So academic institutions play key roles, or a role in three key areas. One is educating the engineers and the people, producing creative people who are capable of driving these innovations. So that's one area. Regulatory thought leadership on the regulatory front. How do we, not just the regulatory front, but also when you think about space mining, there's work on how do we handle commercial aspects of this, whether it's investment or profit sharing, or when you look at the legal aspects of space mining, how do you make it realistic when space is not subject to appropriation or ownership? So there are challenges in those areas that require thought leadership. And there's also the technical innovations, the research that we do at universities that is cutting edge, that is fundamental, that forms the bedrock on which the technologies evolve and can be improved in a commercial setting.
So, with that in mind, what advice would you give to students or young professionals who are interested in pursuing a career in space technology?
Well, the most general advice that I give students is follow your dream, believe in it. That don't Don't think that you're not capable or that it's beyond your reach or, follow your dreams. The other thing is that, space is such a broad area that involvement in space doesn't necessarily happen in one specific way. What I mean by this is, you need all sorts of different skills for space, from project management to the technical, to the commercial, to the business, medical. If you're talking about human habitation in space, you will understand, the medical side of things, or agricultural. So the breadth of skills that is needed is massive, that it can include almost everybody. And so from that perspective, if you have a desire and a dream to go to space, give it a try. You don't hold back. So now the second part of this is, where would you find such work? Yes, granted, in part in other countries like the United States and Europe, or in places like European countries, the chances, or that have traditionally been opportunities, have been greater. But our space industry is growing, and when the space industry is being born, that's where you have many more opportunities for individuals to pursue dreams by starting companies, for example. It's a little bit more difficult when you've got big players to compete with than when the ground is still sort of largely uninhabited. So yeah, I mean, pursue your dream. Don't think that your skills or your area is not suitable for space. Explore, and there are people you can talk to. There is advice that you can seek.
So, expanding on your advice, what specialized skills or emerging disciplines should aspiring space professional prioritize to stay ahead in the field?
Well, technological. So there are different. As I said, there's a massive breadth of skills that are needed. In terms of the technical skills, one of the biggest changes in the way space is done now, as opposed to even if you go back a decade or two ago, is the fact that we are using more commercial off-the-shelf technology. Having something that is space hardened, space tested, with sort of a proven technology, is not that necessary anymore. Now, that's important for the simple fact that if you look in the past, when space systems cost hundreds of millions of dollars, you need a system that you're gonna when you put in that much money to put a satellite in space, for example, you needed to make sure that it does work, that it's going to work over the lifetime that you needed to make a commercial profit. When you put a communication satellite up in geostationary orbit, and it's cost you, a couple $100 million to build, and another, maybe $500 million to build and put up there, you need to run it for 15 years to make a decent return on it. So in the past, every component that was used in space systems had to be space proven, space qualified. And what that meant was that technology had to mature enough for it to be suitable to put on a satellite like this, or a spacecraft like this. So you could only use technologies that are old. You couldn't keep up with the time. Now it's not like that. Now you can just put the latest computer on your spacecraft and set it up there. If it doesn't fail, if it doesn't succeed, if it fails, right, you put the latest computer on your spacecraft and send it up there. If it fails, okay, it's all right. You've lost couple of million dollars. You didn't lose a couple $100 million. So from that perspective, being on top of the latest technological advancements and imagining, sort of where you can take space systems next, can be very useful for engineers. Like you can stand to reap a lot of benefit out of it.
Great insights on skills and disciplines. Following that, how can they get involved in research or industry projects early in their careers?
Well, at university, you can, for example, at UNSW, we have societies like BlueSat. We've got students can choose their research project or their thesis project in those areas. They can choose subjects that are part of the Space Masters as electives in their final years. So, but we've even got programs aimed at high schools, and not just us. I mean, universities in Australia, even governments. NASA runs challenges for universities and high schools. There are opportunities, and the most interesting thing about the way space has changed is that this democratization of space, where space systems are being able to use commercial off-the-shelf components, being launch costs being so low now, it means anybody can do space. So you can, big group of a reasonable group of people can get together and have their own space project, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to launch a satellite. So yeah, I mean, there are opportunities, whether it's formal opportunities at say universities, extracurricular activities, and so on.
That's such an inspiring note to end on. Your perspective on the future of space and the importance of empowering the next generation truly brings the conversation to full circle. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you for having me, and I wish you the best of luck with it. It's a very, very good project that you're starting, and I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you very much, Professor.